Thanks everyone for coming back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, it's been a while. We've both been busy. Everyone across the country seems to be busy as the economic recovery rolls around, but we're starting to hit some limitations in a sense. Pretty tough to get some stuff into and out of the country, and if we are getting it in, it seems to be costing a fair bit more with the supply chain issues. Started to hear a lot about it towards the end of last year. It's now on top of everyone's minds by the sound of it. You've been across the country talking to people on the ground. What have you been hearing?
Yeah, look, demand conditions across a number of industries are very strong. Construction would be a key example, but certainly a lot of other industries doing well. But yeah, supply, gosh, I mean, it was an issue initially when COVID hit and China shut down their factories and we weren't getting much out of China. And through the rest of 2020, of course, a lot of disruption right around the globe. But what we're seeing that translated through to now is rather than it just taking longer for products to get here, we're now seeing significant increases in shipping costs. And everybody I talk to wants to talk about that supply chain disruptions. Container costs, I'm getting stories of anywhere between double what they were prior to COVID to up to 6 times. A lot of people talking around maybe about 3 times the costs they were previously facing. And so that really is stinging businesses who are reliant on product coming in from overseas. There was some sort of sentiment initially that maybe they try and a lot of businesses would look to hold their pricing and not pass it on. But the longer this persists, and it's been a good 6 or 7 months now where this story has been coming through, the longer that keeps going, the more likely those costs just have to be passed on. And we're seeing it particularly in construction, but I mean, across other sort of areas as well, getting hold of appliances in the transport sector, bringing vehicles into the country. It's causing real issues right throughout the economy and causing some inflation concerns, which the Reserve Bank has noted in its latest statement as well.
And it's also just generally slowing down how much stuff can be done across the economy, again, particularly in construction. And that's, of course, an area that we talk about and know a fair bit more intelligence on the ground about. But you are very much hearing that because you're not able to get in some of the fittings, there's a real slowdown on completions. We're also, of course, hearing that builders are having to swap out what they may or may not be using because, well, some of it's just not available. The concern as well is that, like you say, these costs are coming on to some of the producers in the middle. The question now becomes, do they pass those on further? We haven't seen as much evidence as you might have expected coming through in some of the producer price index, capital goods price index and consumers price index data yet. But at the same time, like you say, every story I hear, you hear, everyone is talking about these supply chain issues. It seems a question of how much, not if or when they start to move through into the official numbers, but certainly concerns across the board. I mean, what does that mean from an inflation point of view, but just as importantly from a business point of view, when people are looking at the costs they're already having to manage going higher and higher?
Yeah, I mean, look, for inflation, there's a debate really whether these price pressures and cost pressures are something fairly temporary. And when I say temporary, gosh, it could still last another 12 or 24 months, some of these disruptions that we're seeing. So we're talking that kind of time frame. But the big question is whether that generates further inflationary pressures downstream. And remember, we're already operating in an environment where we've had the minimum wage rise by 27% over the last 3 years, and that's started to show through in some parts, hospitality, for example, in terms of going and eating out. For the price there is heading up. Other cost pressures coming through in terms of double sick leave, a new public holiday next year, plus the sort of sanitation and cleaning costs that you've got associated with COVID. So there's a lot there for businesses to grapple with, and certainly I feel this is the sort of strongest inflationary environment I've seen in probably about 13 or 14 years since the global financial crisis. But does it flow through into further price pressures, or is it just a case of those initial costs being passed on and then businesses sit tight? We'll have to wait and see. I mean, at the moment, the Reserve Bank has said, no, it is only temporary, and we think that inflation will ease back under control next year, and we're not going to go, responding in terms of monetary policy. And that's a fair assessment for now, because, I mean, the Reserve Bank, even if they did raise interest rates, there's nothing that that's going to do in terms of these supply chain effects, which are driving up prices. But it is something we need to keep a close eye on over the next 6 to 12 months, because it could, if it does persist and it does lead to further price pressures, could force the Reserve Bank's hand earlier than either they or financial markets are anticipating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, look, this is the first real supply hit we've had in the economy probably since the 70s in terms of the oil shock. So it's quite a different environment than what we've previously seen. The ANZ Business Outlook survey showing that those pricing pressures are at the highest they've ever been. I mean, it's just incredible in a sense, the level that you're seeing coming through there. But you're right in terms of what do we do about it? And importantly for businesses, what, if anything, can they do? And the short answer is not a lot. You know, there are these concerns across the world in terms of getting some of the product in. We're not seeing that there's as much movement of ships in terms of being able to pick up product from the right places and move it around. These issues have been percolating through the last 6-9 months at least. And like you say, it doesn't seem like we're any closer to resolution. For a lot of businesses also thinking about, okay, how do they secure their own supply chains, given that it's not just cost anymore in terms of being able to buy product or not. It's actually, can you source the damn stuff at the end of the day? And if you can't, what does that mean for your business? So we're starting to hear a lot more people thinking about air freight, you know, almost saying, gosh, can someone just hire a big ship and bring some stuff in for us because it's so hard to get it moving around. Importantly, because it does seem like it's going to persist a bit longer, there probably are some very niche opportunities for New Zealand manufacturers to step into the breach to a point, you know, doing a little bit more of that niche manufacturing to support. But we're not going to have the wholesale recreation of the car assembly market or anything silly like that. But it does suggest that businesses are going to have to watch their supply chains much, much closer. Related to that, there's going to be this concern around, well, look, how do we get product in over time? Do we continue with this just-in-time model of shipping in a bit as we need it, or are there going to be much larger stockpiles of product across the country? I think that latter is likely to be something that businesses look to respond with, because they are going to be fearful of not knowing when the next inventory increase will come through.
Yeah, that's right. And thinking about that inflationary environment as well. I mean, over the last 10 years, I've been surprised at how weak inflation has been persistently through the economy. And there's been a feeling that businesses have been afraid to put up prices even when they have been facing cost pressures, because they're worried that nobody else will follow suit if you're the first mover and then you're left a bit high and dry. I think that the widespread nature of the cost pressures at the moment probably means that all businesses are in the same boat. And so I suspect there is probably more appetite or more ability to put up prices, particularly for most of the economy where those demand conditions have been strong. So, yeah, a lot to unpack there, a lot to watch over the next 6 to 12 months with these pressures and just how long they persist.
Absolutely, and we'll keep an eye on all of those, try to figure out on the ground what things are facing the greatest pressure, where those price increases may be trending through, and like you say, trying to look through if they're temporary or if they're here to stick around for a bit longer. But we'll monitor those and report back on one of our future editions of Econ Talks.